Welcome, friends. This is your weekly live show on the Barricades, delivered to you by The Barricade, the Eastern European left-wing web portal. And I am Bojan Stanislavski, your host. With me is Maria Czernat and a special guest, Małgorzata Kulbaczewska-Figat, the expert and journalist at the Polish left-wing portal Strike. Welcome to our show, both of you.
Hello.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, so today I'd like to take up the situation in Lithuania. And the reason I'd like to talk about it is, first of all, because there's very little discussion about the Baltic states in general. The only thing that we hear in the mainstream media, particularly European mainstream media, is how great these countries are, how fantastically they're managed, because everybody's got internet, everything's digital, the taxes are low, the entrepreneurship is growing, and all the rest of, the neoliberal mantra. And of course, they are the potential, the kind of alleged victims of whatever the Russian threat, the so-called Russian threat. But what happened in the beginning of that month was an important general election. That's an important political event that took place, and it's marked by a defeat of the Social Democratic Party in that country, which has been pronounced by many to be historic one. But before we get to discuss the very political party landscape that has emerged from this legislative election in the beginning of December, I'd like to ask Małgorzata to first discuss the general situation, because Lithuania doesn't seem to have many reasons today to cheer about what happened 30 years ago, and that is the fall apart of the Soviet Union. From the brief research that I've made before our program, the data is rather staggering, like 20% or above 20% really poverty rate, which means above 20% of the population of Lithuania live in poverty. 80% of the private businesses in Lithuania are small and struggle to compete with foreign companies, while there's, of course, statutory support for large capital and major investments. The protections of workers' rights are very weak due to broadly, promoted individualist kind of culture and philosophy. Plus the ever diminishing quality of the sciences and the education system, extremely low pensions also, the neoliberalization and the destruction of the public sector, the weak position of women's rights. I think that's also an important factor here. From what I learned, women earn on average 17% less than men. That's the data for 2019, which is, worse than in Poland and in Bulgaria, as far as I'm concerned. Of course, that is not the end of the story, because there's also this huge negative affection of austerity cuts and pretty much all the policies of the conservative liberal governments. And the one last thing that I want to indicate here is countless human rights violations. And, 30 years after the fall apart of the Soviet Union, countless human rights violations. And I'm thinking you might want to perhaps start with this, Małgorzata. What human rights violations? I assume some of them at least refer to the question of ethnic and national minorities. And perhaps you could, speak about that, and we could take it from there.
Hello. Thanks again for giving me the opportunity to join you on the Barricades again. And I would like to add some details to these very staggering pictures you gave to the viewers. And indeed, Lithuania is 30 years after regaining independence and being very proud of the role it played in the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Lithuania belongs to the poorest countries in the European Union and in Europe as a whole. You said that there are 20% of people living in poverty, and here I'd like to give a little bit more details, because in the past this level was even bigger, and if if the situation got a little bit better over the last few years, it is not due to some it is only in part due to the politics of the previous government. This is the question that I will come back to later, but mainly due to immigration. Because when we are talking about the 30 years of independence of Lithuania, we have to start, in fact, from the question that the independent Lithuania is losing the population. It entered the time of independence with a population of 3.6 million. So it was the most populated country of the three Baltic states. And since 1990, it lost nearly 900,000 citizens who went working abroad. This is an almost 25% loss. And what is more, the Lithuanian government is not really aware of the fact how many people are actually still staying in Lithuania and how many of them are just registered in the country, but in fact have long gone to Ireland, Great Britain, Germany, whatever. And in fact, it is enough to go to Lithuania and to travel between the cities to see that something is very wrong with this country. So basically, if you visit Vilnius, if you visit Kaunas or Klaipėda, you may be really attracted to these places. There, the Vilnius old town or the tourist area in Kaunas are really quite a nice place to visit. But when you travel between the cities, and if you watch the area around and you see no houses, almost no populated places, just empty, abandoned buildings, then you really see that something is really wrong. And coming back to the poverty question, 20% is living in poverty according to the newest statistics, but outside of the cities, it is almost 30%. And just imagine every third person in the countryside living in poverty. And yet another statistic, a graphic statistic that would help you to see how this deterioration image. In 2019, one Lithuanian citizen in 10 had no flushing toilet. European Union and civilization triumph over the Soviet barbarism.
That's just another European value, no running water in the toilet, I guess.
So, you asked me, you mentioned also the question of trade unions and workers' rights and human rights violations. So I tell you one thing. I was in Lithuania in December 2018 when a huge strike of the teachers took place. There was a demonstration of Vilnius, the Gediminas prospect. So, and everybody, the people in the town went out to see how does a demonstration look like, how does a workers' demonstration look like, because they forgot that such an event may take place. And when the teachers were striking for nearly a month, and this was really something that surprised everybody, that the workers are able to organize and that somebody may be actually fighting for a good salary, for a good condition of working, that these topics may be, interesting for anybody. And yes, you were very right to point out that this is the result of individualism and the promotion of being active, being flexible in the job market. Everything, basically Lithuanians were flexible, seeing that there is no chance for good work, almost no good chance for work in the country, apparently mainly outside the cities. They turned out to be flexible and emigrated from the country. And this is the reason for which over the last few years, the strongly neoliberal discourse in Lithuania has been slightly turning, I don't say in left direction, because the Lithuanian left is another problem that we will come back to, but in a little bit more social direction. And in this context, the result of the elections are quite a surprise, but this is another question that we will come back later to. And here you also asked me about human rights violations. So here at this moment, I think I want to mention the affair of Algirdas Paleckis, who was a politician of a tiny social democratic party, advocating, among others, good relations with Russia, or at least stopping this anti-Russian discourse that we are all too used to. And so he was accused of spying of course, for Russia. And without any serious proofs in his case, he was arrested and he spent, a lot of time behind the bars. It was more than, I think it was at least a few months behind the bars, if not longer. And his court case, of course, is not yet over. And the pictures of this man taken during the court hearings were truly terrifying. You know, from a normal guy, he turned into an extremely thin and depressed and a person that is scared of everything. And well, there was, and he even had no resources to be useful for Russia for any kind of intelligence activities. As I told you, he was an activist of a small party who had no parliamentary representation and whose activists actually are mainly visible on Facebook. Or during the tiny pickets when they speak out against militarism for good international relationships, in peaceful international relationships with everybody, and for a little bit and for more nuanced look of the past. So not just the praise for the post-war anti-communist guerrillas, but also some more detailed look on the Soviet Socialist Republic, which, by the way, the term of Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic is not in use in the public discourse in Lithuania. Everybody is supposed to talk about Soviet occupation or the second occupation, and you know, there is even no historical debate on such a basic question like, so if it was an occupation, so why the top leaders of the Lithuanian Communist Party were Lithuanians, and why the party had never a problem to get cadres, to get people to work for it. So if now people in Lithuania are taught that it was a foreign invasion, occupation, and the total destruction of everything that was in the country, which and as for the pre-war dictatorship of Antanas Smetona, that it is nothing to be ashamed of.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Małgorzata, for this introduction. Yeah, please, Maria, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, according to what I've read online, and this is public information, this is not some Russian conspiracy. There was a problem with the CIA-operated prison in Lithuania, and the former president, Dalia Grybauskaitė, said that they have to take responsibility for that because there was an investigation and some journalists exposed the CIA-operated prison. Now, this is quite troubling. I mean, you have so many problems with the Russians while at the same time allowing the CIA to operate a prison near Vilnius. From what I read, it was in a village that is now quite incorporated but very close to the capital, to Vilnius. So this is a very interesting thing. And also what I want you to say is a little bit elaborate on that. And another thing, that president is very interesting. I mean, I think she's one of the best examples that having a female in office will not guarantee that the women's rights are going to be, praised and cherished, and that the women of Lithuania do not have really a partner just by the mere fact that the president is a woman. Because this woman was, in my opinion, from what I read, this Dalia Grybauskaitė was a person of the system, and she was in office for quite a while, from 2014 or not, even longer. She was in office till
2019.
2009 till 2019. So she was in office, but she represented Lithuania in the free trade agreements with the European Union. And what is also interesting, and I want you to elaborate on that, she was appointed, I don't know what is that, and maybe you do, a plenipotentiary minister in the United States Lithuanian embassy in 1996. Do you know what that is? I mean, do you have a minister closely related to the embassy? What is this?
Oh, when we are talking about the political career of Mrs. Grybauskaitė, we need to start that before the collapse of so-called communism, before the end of Soviet occupation, she was actually, according to Lithuanian terminology, one of the occupants, because she was a member of party, she was an activist in the youth organization, and
she was a lecturer.
Yes, and she was even a lecturer
in the school, the some sort of academy of the Communist Party.
Yes,
or something
exactly.
Like that.
Yes,
so that's probably the worst form of the occupation that you can get.
Yeah.
Yes, and she taught political economy there. And once the real socialism was over, she immediately switched sides and she started working on assimilating Lithuania with the West. So she was then working closely with the United States in this position that is, well, we can just say this is an unofficial title for doing something, something behind the scenes. And then she was a European commissioner. And then she came back to the country that was already fully integrated into European and Western defense structures to serve as presidents as long as it was possible. She served 10 years, and she could have not worked in this position anymore. And yes, you are absolutely right to say that having a female president means, well, that you have a female president and nothing else. And now Lithuania is
just well, of course it matters, because for the young girls who see a woman president, that means that they could be sometimes, or they can arrive, and it has a visual impact, so to speak, and it has an impact, but it is so, I don't know, idealized. I mean, I do not want to diminish, but I do not want to fall into the trap of idealizing this situation, because this person went from the school of the Communist Party in 1990 directly to the Edmund Walsh Washington for School of Foreign Service in Georgetown University, and then she became a graduate there of the special program for senior executives. Now, for those of us who know a little bit about Secret Service, and especially here in Romania, where we had quite an experience with that type of institution, this sounds a lot like, giving some sort of training for those who are going to be in power in some sort of neo-colonialism in a colony, in this type of system. So
yes, right. And so perhaps Grybauskaitė indeed had a part in inspiring a new generation of Lithuanian girls to go into politics, because now the government of Lithuania is being led by another woman, Ingrida Šimonytė, that I can talk about her more later, and also one of two parties that formed another party of the three that formed the coalition is also led by a woman. There are also female ministers and, quite a lot of women in Lithuanian politics. But all of these women represent, we can say, one circle. So either girls born in good families in the cities, or girls who had some chance in their lives to join this liberal elite. Yes, because they are mainly in liberal parties, indeed, in the Homeland Union, that is the most important conservative party. Women are definitely less visible. So yes, this conservatives is also strong in Lithuania. But yes, so the main legacy of Grybauskaitė in modern Lithuania is not a struggle for women's rights, because the inequalities in pay share are definitely a huge problem in this country. Her legacy is more Russophobia and the very stronger alliances with the NATO, with the West in general, and And in today's Lithuania, there is no debate about international relations, about potential allies of the country, or the potential profits, or of not being the no man's land or the buffer zone, whatever how you call it. It is a dogma for everybody. Everybody everybody believes. Nobody. I mean, among the political elites, nobody would even dare to criticize or to put in question the politics of becoming more and more a base for the United States, a place where, when the United States wants, they can place a secret prison, they can put another group of soldiers, and there is a difference in this matter even between Lithuania and Poland, where this pro-NATO discourse is also extremely strong. In Poland, still we have some courageous people, commentators who say, hey, if a war erupts, we become a buffer zone and our country is erased from the land. Do you really want that? In Lithuania, I don't think that anybody dares to say so.
Well, thanks a lot for this, truly horrific picture. But it seems like Maria has disappeared for a while. Hope she joins us in a sec. Look, just to sum it up, everything you said about Dalia Grybauskaitė, I think, is very symbolic in a way that she is just the impersonification of the failure of the Lithuanian state after 1989. Because, you said it yourself, she was first a teacher in the times of the Soviet Union in an important school. So like today, by today's terminology, by today's interpretation, she was like one of the occupiers. Then, she became a lobbyist for American imperialism. Then she became an EU commissioner. And then she came back to Lithuania to become its president, to basically do absolutely, literally nothing for the people, to do nothing in order to meet their needs, to do nothing in order to strengthen the state, the infrastructure, the administration, to do anything for any kind of rational administration or governance. But what she did, and apparently from what you just described and for what Maria said, she was perfectly trained to become a viceroy of the American metropolis, and to turn Lithuania into, if not colony, then a clientelist state. And she is, this clientelist politician that will do anything, that not even the American ambassador in Vilnius, but probably the 5th press secretary in the embassy is just going to tell her to do. So, and of course, on the other hand, everything you said, additionally to what I did in my introduction about the demographic disaster, ongoing demographic disaster, that reminds me of Bulgaria and the province, which is almost empty. That's also, that resembles Bulgaria a lot. And, that all seems to, add up to Lithuania being largely a failed state. Okay, not like Libya maybe, where they have, slave markets thanks to the NATO invasion, but largely a failed state, like a state that is not able to exercise its sovereignty to any extent, and that is not capable, its elite and its, activist base, it cannot afford by any stretch of the imagination to actually counter the, narrative, which, is totally uncritical towards the developments that have been taking place in Lithuania for the last 30 years, which have brought Lithuania to this particular place that you just described. And, let's now move over to the question of the left, because you said it yourself that the left, instead of being a solution, is yet another problem in Lithuania. Why is it a problem? What kind of problem is it? How does it, fit into the general framework of the problems of the Eastern European left. And finally, why is this defeat such a historic blow?
Okay, so to understand what happened to Lithuanian Social Democrats, we have to go back a little bit to at least to 2016, or even a little bit earlier. And what I am going to talk about will sound very familiar to those who listen us, who are from different Eastern Europe countries, even if they are not familiar with the situation in Lithuania. So in 2012 and in the 2009 and then in 2012, the Lithuanian Social Democratic Party managed to win elections 2 times in a row, and Algirdas Brazauskas, another former occupant because he used to be a member of a communist party, was able to form a government 2 times in a row. And that was a historical success of the Lithuanian left, because in earlier years no party managed to rule the country 2 times in a row. So let's go a little bit back. So after the fail of communism, Lithuania was left with a big fragmented political scene. But two most important forces there were, on the one hand, the Homeland Union, so the national conservatives praising the anti-communist guerrillas, and of course standing on neoliberal positions in the terms of economy. And the second wing of the political scene were the Social Democrats. And at the beginning of 21st century, they were the political force that had the most support of the community, the biggest percentage of the vote, and really high hopes were behind that party, that they would repair at least some bits of what was broken after the transformation, that they would, that to be sure, that they would stop this economic disaster. And perhaps at that point, not perhaps, but for sure, Lithuania at that point was already connected to the West. It was already quite Russophobic with its political elite, but at least the population had hopes that Social Democrats would stop this deterioration, the depopulation, the deindustrialization, all these that come up usually with neoliberal transformations in Eastern Europe. And what did they do in the end? Well, I think you two may already guess. Yes, during their second rule, Algirdas Brazauskas announced that it was necessary to liberalize the labor code and to give more opportunities to business. Yes,
of course.
To hire and fire the workers in a much easier manner. And on the second time, to complicate.
They can never surprise me. Yeah.
The existence of the trade unions. So it was even more painful. It was even more painful to observe, because the Social Democrats in Lithuania in the previous years seemed actually to be quite rational people. Of course, the leaders were the corrupted post-communist nomenclatura, not the really idealist people, but at least they understood what is their role. They understood that if there is a Homeland Union party, hardcore national conservatives, then their role is to counter them. And this is the way they are going to apply to poor people, to people from outside the cities, to workers, to those who were not really the winners of the transformations. And that their role is also to counter a little bit the crazy historical politics with all these absurds. And so it was even more painful to see how they finally, they seem to forgot all this recipe that secured for them a good position in the political scene, and they went on with liberalizing the job market. And as you may guess, they were severely punished for that in previous parliamentary elections of 2016, which were won actually by a completely unknown party, a new party of the farmers and Greens, an eclectic political entity who claimed to combine ecology with support for small business from the people who are not living in the cities and who had an oligarch, an agriculture oligarch on the top. And so,
but at least I think they were local elites, isn't it? Some sort
yes.
of, because from what I've seen, these leaders were the product of the Western countries, and they were simply doing what they were told. And they were acting like they were there, I don't know, to exercise the power in the name of the United States, the European Commission, or whatever. And for once, maybe these were local elites having their own agenda.
Well, to some extent, yes. The Greens and farmers were indeed local activists, local anti-corruption people, small local businessmen, and Saulius Skvernelis, who was then the prime minister in their government, who was, by the way, just a sympathizer of the party and not a full member. He used to be the top policeman of the country. So, you know, still quite an exotic mixture. But what happened? And this exotic government actually managed to change the vectors a little bit. They offered more social care to the families. They did some measure. They guaranteed meals for Lithuanian children at school. You know, the small gestures that may count a lot. They also offered extra money for the pensioners who suffer in extreme poverty. You know, little things that did not cost that much, which secured some political base for them. And I'm sure, hadn't there been pandemics on the way in 2020, I think they would have I think they would have won again the second. At least they would have a good chance to win the election. Under the pandemics, where Lithuania was hit strongly, not only because of what the current government did not do, but due to all this neoliberal legacy, they only came second with 80% and 32 seats in the same as the Lithuanian parliament. And the big winners are conservatives of the Homeland Union, which is basically the victory of PR and interesting campaign. And
because you mentioned campaign, then I just want to interject very briefly here, because I read a couple of articles, and one of them on the Transform Network's website, and the editor, the author of that article said that, and I quote, "Many criticize the LSDP campaign as sluggish and unmemorable. I would say," she writes, "that there was no LSDP election campaign whatsoever." Would you agree?
Oh, yes. Yes, I agree, absolutely. Well, honestly, I can't even repeat some main slogan or some main lines of the campaign. I remember the leader of the party, Gintaras Paluckas, saying that the party has been refreshed, that the old nomenclatura is gone, but you know, on the side of some interesting offers for the population, I just remember some brief remarks that we are going to defend everybody. We are going to listen to everybody. Oh, yeah. You know, well.
That's not very radical. That's true.
Yes. You know, actually, it is interesting that actually more radical proposals were pronounced during the previous electoral campaign that Lithuania saw. So the presidential campaign on 2019, when the presidential elections were won by Gitanas Nausėda, who used to work in a banking industry and who then was a kind of TV celebrity. And you know, this guy had the courage to say in Lithuania that his direction is welfare state, that he's interested in German solutions where the trade unions are talking to employers about working conditions. You know, that guy was courageous enough to say such stuff and yet to travel outside Vilnius and Kaunas and to talk to people. And the Social Democrats intended to win the election, saying that they are listening to everybody. Hello.
I wanna ask something here because this individual, Gintanas Nausėda, said that he was a banker for most of his life, from what I've read, and he worked for banking institutions, but he didn't work for international banking institution, from what I read. He worked for internal banking institutions, and I think this is important. And also the fact that he wasn't independent. Is it true?
Yes, he was. Yes, we can say that he was a representative of national capitalism, yes, and for securing a place for Lithuania that is a little bit more than a colony and a little bit more than a place that gets directions from outside. And what is also interesting that after he became president in 2019, he began to talk that Lithuania needs not only guarantees from Washington, but also to talk to European Union and to treat it as an alternative, as to search for a balance. And he also started to fix the relations with minorities. He was the only president so far in Lithuania who, during his campaign, who talked to the Russians, who talked to Poles, and who, let's say, who put the relationship, the Polish-Lithuanian relationship on quite let's say on higher level. And in this context, he also he was in good cooperation with Skvernelis, the prime minister from the side of farmers and Greens. You know, the two countries stopped like attacking each other, and well, it is there is a dark part to this new cohabitation too, because this meant that Lithuania and Poland are now were cooperating in more anti-Russian symbolic projects, like a big ceremony that took place last year in Vilnius to bury two participants of January uprising of 1864. There was a huge ceremony of reburial of these people and.
Oh, hello?
Yes, I think she has an unstable internet connection. This is so
right.
familiar.
So we've lost Małgorzata for a while. Hopefully she manages to come back.
Yes, also.
Oh, okay. Małgorzata, hello. We've lost you for a short while. Could you please repeat the last 30 seconds or maybe 15 seconds?
Okay, so I was talking about Polish-Lithuanian relationships
and the
like
reburial ceremony that was used for propaganda purposes.
Yes, so there were last year in November last year there was a pompous ceremony, yes, of reburial of two participants of the January uprising of 1864, which was made and turned an occasion to talk about fight of the Eastern European for freedom and that Lithuanians were working together at that time, which were not really, and that they are now working together again on the side of the freedom.
Okay, yeah, that's horrific what you just described again. But I'd like to push the discussion back a little bit into the rail of the left and why it failed because look. What I also read is that the Social Democrats, they kind of tried. Actually, they've made an attempt, at least publicly, in terms of PR or marketing, to relaunch themselves in a way that now we're going to actually after this this moment of neoliberal obsessions, okay, we are now back to the good old social democracy kind of ideological framework, okay? And I would like to ask, how did it manifest itself? I mean, did they really organize, political events or maybe something else in order to display the kind of change that they intended to, I don't know whether to actually do, but to at least communicate to the society? Because, in Poland, for example, we've heard many times how our social democrats the Democratic Left Alliance, how they are going to have a new, a generational change. And, it always ended up in a kind of very grotesque way. Like, for example, one 71-year-old leader was replaced by someone who was 65 or something like that. It was the generational change, right? So it was just, there was a lot of posturing, but in the final aftermath, nothing really manifested that there would have been any change. So the question is whether the Lithuanian Social Democrats, whether they took it seriously, whether they really wanted to do something, and they were just incapable of doing that because of the general straitjacket of the Euro-Atlantic ideological straitjacket, as I said, or is it, or was it just pretense?
The leadership of the Social Democratic Party are still people in their 40s and 50s, and it is true that the party got rid of some of the most compromised activists, and that some of the former nomenclatura left the party anyway to form another social democratic party. This happened in 2017 when the Lithuanian Social Democrats joined the coalition with the Greens when they went out of the coalitions of Green and Farmers, in which they were for a while. Mm-hmm. So on one hand, we can say that, yes, the party really refreshed itself, but on the other side, it remains very poor in organizational manner. And yet the pandemics did not really give good environment for them to manifest manifest the change. Anyway, this is again some general remark that could be valid to any of Eastern European countries. The best way to show that a real change took place for a social democratic party would be to engage in workers' struggles. Mm-hmm. And here in Lithuania, there is very difficult to join workers, as they are, most of them is not organized, is not actually courageous to lead any struggles. So what the Social Democrats did, and yet another mistake that the Social Democrats did was the fact that after they went out of the coalition with the Farmers and Greens, then joined the choir of opposition, the liberal and conservative opposition in the parliament, that criticized the government for being populist, for being anti-European, for being, I don't know how to say it, for defending so-called traditional.
I bet she was going to say traditional values. I'm not sure we can.
Traditional values, yes. Well, I was thinking that here in Romania, some very horrible things happen in terms of politics, meaning that most of the ministries are now liberals, national liberals, or from the Union Save Romania party. Mm-hmm. And now I'm hoping that the Union Save Romania will not do as they say in their, program, in their political program, because if they do, then,
Then we're really going to get it. Yeah, then it's really going to be terrible. For me, everything that Małgorzata said was pretty revealing, because, I was familiar with the general situation, but not with all of the details, which are absolutely, truly hair-raising that she presented. But what it appears is that Lithuania is a kind of toxic mixture. Like the situation in Lithuania today is a toxic mixture of what we can, like the worst elements from the current Polish political reality and the worst elements of the Bulgarian. Oh, okay, Małgorzata is back with us. Let me just pick her in.
Well, it is my internet connection that failed. Sorry for that mess.
That's all right. So, I was just summarizing here, that Lithuania today seems to be a kind of weird mixture between, the worst elements of the current Polish Polish political reality and the worst elements of the current Bulgarian political reality. Now, I don't know how accurate it is, but on the one hand, it really, and it's in a way it's funny, but it's actually tragic. I mean, had it not been tragic, it would have been super funny probably. But you see, this kind of depopulation, this kind of impoverishment, this kind of complete fall apart of the structures of the state, that is something like third world countries features, more or less. And we see that, we observe that in Bulgaria to a large extent. We probably observe that in Romania. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Maria. And also this clientelism, okay, particularly towards the United States, where everything, every decision, every major act in terms of politics has to be at least consulted with the American embassy, and the kind of absolute obedience of the of the establishment, which is offensive probably to some people or to many people, because this is like, people have dignity, right? Like no matter if we speak about large groups, collectives, or individuals, but some people still take a note of what is going on. And I'm not sure how it exactly developed and unfolded in Lithuania, but in Bulgaria or in Poland, many people are turning to the right, which offers them some kind of falsified language of dignity and sovereignty. And, at the same time, the left is pretty much unable to really kind of interject in this discourse, because in terms of this cultural, sociological elements, the left doesn't have much to offer to our, to the populations of this region. In a way, in a situation that we are in, it's much easier to appeal to the people by trying to engage with their national identity and, their history, no matter how you want to falsify it, right? But still, you can do that then with all kinds of civic liberties that have been around, at least, that's what it says. That's what it said. That's how it's presented, I mean. That all kinds of civic liberties have been around, and the people haven't benefited from them really much. In a way, people are probably okay, all right, with the fact that there's democracy, that there is, freedom of speech, at least to some extent, although in Lithuania, as you explained, with this social democratic activist that was jailed for simply saying that he thinks it might actually make sense to discuss with Russia, instead of just doing this kind of bellicose posturing, because we're a small country with no army, or like virtually no army, with, but we're a small territory. What are we going to do? I mean, how are we going to benefit from this kind of political behavior? And he was jailed. He was put in prison. Okay, and he was tortured, maybe because you said that his physical and mental shape isn't good. And we also had that, by the way. That's why I'm saying that it's the worst combination of the features, the worst features of Bulgaria and Poland, because in Poland we also had a political prisoner, Mateusz Piskorski, who was jailed particularly for leading a pro-Russian, an openly kind of, I would say, a very cheaply pro-Russian. Well, they call it a party, but it wasn't even a party because they were not able to even register, properly. So it was just a pro-Russian group somehow here in Poland. And while I personally don't like most of his views, I still think it's terribly frightening to have someone who is just a leader of a minor, unable to register organization, to put them in jail for, I don't know how long, I think 18 months he spent in jail or something like that. So, on the one hand, these troubling, ideologically based, Western obsessed, anti-Russian stance, followed by dictatorial measures like locking up people for just saying what they think about international relations, regardless of whether we agree with them or not. And on the other hand, striking poverty and destruction, like in destruction of society, destruction of infrastructure, destruction of statehood, destruction of administration, and destruction of sovereignty. And I think that's...
I want to say something too. Well, I think I just realized right now, sorry for interjecting, Margojata, but I think I just realized why the right is winning. Because you see, the propaganda model was so perverse. I mean, we literally had so much economic hardship and sufferance and grievances, and they were all blamed to the communism. That was the unique, efficient propaganda that while, I don't know, making people work abroad and because they have no jobs here, destroying the local industries, basically destroying everything that was local in terms of economy industry, and at the same time blaming it all on communism and on the Russians. That was a very clever move, and this is the current state of a very powerful propaganda that I don't think we are going to see ending in the next years. And this is the situation in Romania, and I think also in Bulgaria, Poland, because it's a very powerful and efficient way of doing propaganda. And at the same time, you don't have a left that is coming and confronting this narrative because it is too dangerous, but instead you have right-wing politicians saying, oh, we are great, we are a great nation, we should defend ourselves. So you basically offer historical and cultural solutions to economic hardships. I mean, we are economically destroyed, but we don't want to confront the real enemies. Instead, we provide a very useful theory of our nation being great and so on and so forth.
Right, Małgorzata, would you like to comment on that?
Well, as I would like to, I think that it would be good point to go to come back at this point to the new government of Lithuania that was sworn in this week, because it illustrates pretty well what you both have just said. So what we have now in power in Lithuania is the combination of conservatism represented by the Homeland Union, who is the winner of the election and who got the most important posts in the new government. And their partners are the liberals from the Freedom Party and liberal movement of Republic of Lithuania. But this Freedom Party is interesting to have a closer look at, because why there are two liberal parties in the government instead of one? Well, because there was a split in the liberal movement. There was a corruption scandal, and so this and this the splitting group persuaded part of this relatively well-being electorate from the cities that they are the most modern, the most European, the most libertarian party available in Lithuania. And what they represent is purely a liberalism without a social wing. They you know on which slogans they made their campaign. So on one hand, they talked about LGBT rights. On the other hand, they talked about soft drugs that could be legalized. And together with the effect of being new and fresh, this secured them a place in the government, including a place for Aušrinė Armonaitė, their leader, who is one of the most notorious neoliberal politicians in Lithuania. Another woman. So you see, really women.
I just want to ask, is that about the beach also? I mean, the beach falls into that, like the beach in Vilnius? Because I heard that Sandy Beach in Vilnius was like also a central part of the campaign. I mean, what was it about this? Just
oh, I can talk about the beach in a moment, but just let me finish with the government, sure. Because the key figure of the government, so Ingrida Šimonytė, the prime minister, is also quite an interesting personality to complete the picture. She is supposedly a non-partisan expert prime minister because she's not a member of any party, but she has quite a long political history behind her because she was the Minister of Economy in 2009 Andrius Kubilius government, who introduced, just guess what, the most radical austerity measures in Lithuania as a response to 2008 crisis. And then she had a successful career in banking industry. She tried to become president in the last year's elections. She came second, and now she is coming back as a prime minister, which is perhaps a success for her because the prime minister has actually much more to do in Lithuanian political system. So what we get out of this mixture of being disappointed with Social Democrats and the anger with the way that the government handled the pandemic. So Lithuanians voted for a government which will do exactly the opposite of what this society might need. But we can also, another important thing is that we see that the split in this society is really deep, and that the Social Democrats have perhaps forever lost the chance to be a part of the new divisions. Because on one hand, we have these relatively well-being people living in Vilnius and other bigger centers who are really happy to vote for people like Mrs. Šimonytė, because she is the person who represents them, who represent their economic interest and their thirst for personal freedoms that they see in Western Europe. On the other hand, we have the destitute, we have the poor people from the province who have already their party, and this is the party of Greens and Farmers who showed that actually some social policies may be introduced.
I want to ask you here this, because it's a very important question, I think, for not just for me, but generally for the viewers from around Eastern Europe. Do you think that that one could compare this Green Peasants Party with the Polish Law and Justice? In a way, of course, I understand that the Green Peasants in Lithuania are not necessarily Catholic fundamentalists and so on and so forth, and they don't care so much about abortion and, church and all the rest of it. But I'm thinking, there seems to be something similar, okay, something substantially similar in a way that, look, this is a right-wing party, and this has been the agenda of Law and Justice from the beginning, really. Today, people kind of forget about it because it was, 6 years ago that they've won their first election, or 5 years ago. But, excuse me, but, that was their agenda. At least that's how I read it. Well, we know some of you have lost over the period of the so-called transition, and we don't think the transition was very just. We can't do much about it, but we can do something. But otherwise, apart from that, we're gonna make Poland rise on its feet. We're gonna, regain our dignity, our sovereignty. We're gonna do all these great things that the Polish nation deserves, and and that appealed mostly. What triggered really the success, the electoral success of Law and Justice, was that people were so tired, so sick and tired of the two. Of the so-called liberal, neoliberal, slightly conservative, government for 80 years, okay, of the civic platform, Donald Tusk's party, that, when they heard that someone's actually going to give them something, and they start promising that, up front, okay, like before being elected, before being pressed, before having all kinds of demonstrations and mobilizations in favor of certain causes, and so on and so forth. So they just thought, okay, let's go for it. And then, they just did through, okay, a few crumbs here and there. And then there was this tsunami, okay, of right-wing identity, obsessive, obsessions, and, propaganda against refugees, gay people, Russians, Germans, Brussels, and, all, like the entire world. They put Poland in a position of being at war with pretty much everything that is dominating, that is part of the dominating liberal democratic agenda. Okay, so I'm just wondering whether is this the same kind of thing? I mean, this sort of appeal resonates with people in the province. People in the big urban centers don't like that because they have some stability. It's not much, but in comparison to the province, it's something. So they are more kind of, more open to all these socio-cultural openness, okay, that is offered as a part of what, what the mainstream likes to refer to as an open society, like whatever it's supposed to mean. So do you think that this comparison is justifiable?
There are clear similarities in Lithuanian and Polish politics as well. There are clear differences. So what is similar if we compare Law and Justice and the Greens farmers is that definitely Greens and farmers finally began talking to those people who after what the Social Democrats did with the Labor Code, they started talking to people who had barely no representatives, apart from some tiny oligarchic parties that I'm not going to mention here because I guess we don't have much more time left. So that farmers and Greens really started talking to people whose voice was not heard, and they showed that their promises might be held. They promised help for families, and it came. They promised to support the pensioners, and also this turned out to be possible. It would be interesting what would happen next, because they started promising that the education level will go higher. That would be more difficult to get in the neoliberal country. But so what they did so far was already interesting enough so that they get a solid electoral base in the province. And this is perhaps the voters that Social Democrats lost, if not forever, then at least for good. What was different was that politics of constant wars and going to war against everybody. No, but I think this is rather the question of some patterns that are already in Lithuanians' heads after 30 years. Everybody in Lithuania has heard that Russia is dangerous for them, and that if Russia has not yet invaded, then this problem is always somewhere in the air. And so it would be really incomprehensible for anybody in Lithuania had the government went on a war against the European Union. If Western Europe is ally and it is perceived as such by everybody, for all the political forces, then really there is no reason to wage war against them. And particularly that Lithuanians' voice is heard in Brussels. Brussels repeats often this anti-Russia rhetorics, the warmongers rhetorics, and there is really no reason to stage a conflict. And as far as traditional values and Catholicism is important for Law and Justice, I think that this is the similarity again. This manifested itself in Lithuania. So the Greens and farmers were even labeled by their opponents as the party that issues bans the personal freedoms, because they were against LGBT rights, against the total freedom of expressing yourself, and so on. And here, I think, is the excellent point to go to the beach in the center of Vilnius that you mentioned. Because the beach was basically introduced in the electoral campaign as a trap for the Greens and farmers. Here's what's the story about the beach. So Remigius Šimasius, who is the mayor of Vilnius and who is an important person in the Freedom Party circles, one of the key figures in the liberal camp, organized a beach. Well, he set a beach in the very symbolic place in Lithuanian capital, the Łukiškių aikštė, the Łukiškės Square, which is the place where in the Tsarist time there were gallows and the executions took place. And just next to there is the former KGB building with the most important martyrology museum in Lithuania. And the intention was that the beach shows that Lithuania has overcome difficult history and now is walking towards the shining path of the future.
So we can have a disco in the former prison or whatever, kind of the KGB stuff.
Yes, we won, and now it's time to be happy. And
Well, but you have the CIA one next to Vilnius, so
But that's also a success. That's a success.
you have to be careful not to mistake one for,
Yeah. I mean, Maria is right. If you start dancing in the middle, I don't know, in the main corridor of the CIA secret prison, then you're in trouble, probably. I mean, you got a point. You got a point.
And, instead, the opposition, so not the opposition, but the farmers and Greens decided to criticize the initiative, but instead of focusing on the fact that the beach was made from public money, which could have been spent in different way, they went on with the moralist discourse that the sacred place has been devastated. And the very important leitmotif of the campaign became the question of whether who is offended by the beach.
Yeah, who is it?
Yes. And the Social Democrats.
The CIA prison just miles away, just some.
Yeah, of course. Torturing random Arabs right outside the outskirts of the capital city, that doesn't offend anyone. But people apparently dancing right next to an old KGB building, well, that's a serious problem. And I think that's definitely I believe that this has been the most important problem to solve, because otherwise, as we heard for over this 1 hour, Lithuania flourishes. The only one thing that is left to be fixed.
Yes, the only problem was that the people from Vilnius who had not access to beach. So
that's really, and I really hope that that Lithuanians solve that little problem, and from then on they just live in paradise on earth. But outside the kind of the kind of political jokes. Before we go, and I know we've run over time, but I just have to ask.
I want to thank our viewers.
But I want to ask one more question, and I hope Małgorzata can answer it very briefly. I'm really sorry about it, but I just want to know, because Lithuania is a small country, a small territory with devastated by neoliberalism and so on and so forth. And yet there are people who are similar in their appeal and political profile to the law and justice in Poland. And I'm just wondering, the Polish conservatism is very clear to me. I understand its, most important points, most important construction elements, the Catholic Church, the history, and all the rest of it. But what is the major component that, people fall for in Lithuanian nationalism or right-wing hardlinerism and so on and so forth? What do they what is their political communication?
So in Poland, the main component of nationalism is the belief that Poland has been all over the centuries, has been attacked by everybody and has bravely fought for freedom. In Lithuania, from the very birth of nationalist movement in 19th century, it is the sense of being unique that is the ground for this. Lithuania has one of the oldest languages in Europe, a very archaic language that is not really similar to any other living language, to some extent to Latvian, but also in very limited extent. And yet they bear their national pride on the very fact that, being a tiny nation with this archaic language, they did not get Polonized, then they did not get Russified, even at the time when the Russification was really tough, because they were forced to write in Cyrillic script, even if in their language.
Looks like the end of the program came.
Yes, the end of the program, but I wanted to thank our viewers. I see here that there are some viewers from Bulgaria that wrote something that I cannot understand, but I thank them anyway, even if they say bad things about me. And I see somebody, I think is from Romania, that wrote here, call it by name fascism, and he wrote that while I was speaking. Well, I don't know if that's so simple, because right now you have political parties that combine neoliberalism with pro-LGBT measures, and they pinkwash themselves, and you have conservatives who on economic terms are willing to do more in terms of having higher pensions and giving people money in terms of child allowance and so on and so forth. So right now defining fascism becomes complicated because it depends on what.
You're absolutely right. But
economically, you may have, like you have in Poland, Law and Justice that gave and raised child allowance. And for a lot of families living in poverty, that was very important. And you cannot call them fascist only by that. And then you have the neoliberals ones that are very open-minded, so to speak. And as I told you, they pinkwash themselves. They feminist wash themselves. They pose as feminists and as promoters of women's rights. And at the same time, they cut the minimum wage. So it's very difficult to understand.
You're absolutely right. But also, like, the very last thought that I want to express here is that, the Peasants' Party, whatever, Green Peasants' Party that Małgorzata referred to many times during our discussion, how does one win in situations with difficult, circumstances, like in Lithuania, like in Bulgaria, like in Poland, like in Romania? Well, by doing something substantial and by sticking to your promises. So, here's my advice to the left throughout the region. I understand there's a problem with, the weak labor movement, with a lot of apathy, with a lot of hopelessness, and so on and so forth, like prevailing conservatism, blah, blah, blah. We know the mantra, right? Now, but here's a piece of advice. Go out, put yourselves out there, offer something substantial, stick to it, and you'll start, here you're going to have something to build on. Like, get to the parliament, build, promise something meaningful during the election campaign, during the electoral campaign, and then, just fulfill it. And you'll see that there is going to be a lot of enthusiasm and support in the society. And on that, you can definitely build, like Law and Justice in Poland, like the Peasants' Party in Green Peasants' Party in Lithuania, and like many other structures throughout the region of Eastern Europe. Anyway, thanks so much to everyone, to those who left comments, to those who watched our show, and to Małgorzata Kulbaczewska, who, obviously wasn't able to say her final goodbye here to our viewers because of her unstable internet connection. And thank you, Maria, for being the co-host of this program.
Thank you so much. See you all next week, and thank you for the comments that you left.